This is Ray Brescia on Legal AF, which is part of the Midas Touch Network. I teach law at Albany Law School, but all of the opinions expressed here are my own. If you like what you see here and other places on the network, please like, subscribe, and share as you see fit. Today, I'm going to talk about what's come to be known as the 3.5% rule. Now, many of you probably have heard of it. People who've engaged in things like the No Kings protest. The 3.5% rule was devised by researchers Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan. And they analyzed hundreds of successful protest movements over the last century or so and came to a figure that said that, successful nonviolent protest movements work and bring about significant change in society when they reach 3.5% of the population participating in public demonstrations, in activism, seeking to advance social change. Now, some people may have heard that term and said, oh, then, magically what we need to get to is 3.5% of the population, and presto changeo, we will have social change, right? Now, if you're keeping tabs, many analysts of the recent No Kings protests in October of 2025, estimates are that 7 million people participated in those protests around the country. That's about 2% of the U.S. population. In order to get to the 3.5% rule, to bring about significant change, if you believed in that 3.5% rule, you would need to get to about 12 million people. So they're more than half the way there with those protests, right? But it's not a talisman. It's not a magic wand that if you get to 3.5% of the population, there's going to be change automatically, right? Getting to that 3.5% of the population is a challenge in and of itself, right? But I would I would say the 3.5% rule, just sort of looking at it as sort of simply, it's akin to, the 10,000 hour rule that was popularized by author Malcolm Gladwell, right? If you do something, you practice something for 10,000 hours, you're going to be an expert in it, right? But if you dig under the surface of the 10,000 hour rule, it actually derived from research done by a Swedish psychologist, Anders Ericsson, who said that actually it's not just any kind of 10,000 hours, it's what he described as deliberate practice. So deliberate practice for 10,000 hours, it can set you apart. And deliberate practice has particular elements to it. And I'm going to look at those elements and say, okay, can we translate those to protests, to political movements, in what I'm going to call deliberate protest, right? So if you've got deliberate practice, perhaps we can have deliberate protest, right? And I'll talk about some of my own research in this area to complement the incredible work of Chenoweth and Stefan. So what Ericsson said was, deliberate practice, takes people out of their comfort zone, is focused, concentrated, you work on it incrementally, you're constantly getting feedback, you focus on perfecting one element of the expertise you're trying to develop, and then you move on to the next, and it builds incrementally. You start small. What the Heath brothers in their great book Switch might call shrinking the change, right? You take on bite-sized chunks and move out from there, right? And so how can we translate deliberate practice to this deliberate deliberate protest idea that I want to talk to you about. And there are some similarities, what I think in the social change space, and I've done some research in this area, not the quantitative, incredible work of Chenoweth and Stephan, but my own more qualitative research in looking at some successful social movements in the United States. I found that what I would call deliberate protest involves harnessing three important things, right? The medium, the network, and the message, right? So the medium is, making sure you're utilizing the best technologies available to communicate your message, to coordinate, to advance change. And if you look at over the course of American history, really from colonial times to the present, the significant social change has happened when there's been an introduction of a new type of communication method, right? That social movements have risen up and seized that new means of communication and used it to advance their cause and their message, right? And it goes, as I said, it goes back to colonial times. There were just a few printing presses in the colonies in the 18th century until we get to the 1750s, 1760s. And then printers became significant players, if you would, in the formation of revolutionary spirit and coordinating revolutionary activities, in the lead up to independence, right? Fast forward just a few years, and we get to the introduction of the steam printing press, and with the steam printing press, the abolitionist movement arises, right? That they use the steam printing press, which can print much faster than the hand press, and they use the steam printing press to advance their cause and to bring supporters into the fold. Go just a few years later, you get the telegraph, and the women's movement arises by harnessing the telegraph, and the word of the first meeting of the women's movement, if you would, at Seneca Falls, is news of that is spread through the telegraph, right? Move forward, you get to the telephone and the progressive era. The radio is used by FDR to advance the New Deal cause. Television is seized by the civil rights movement, and the message of the civil rights movement, images of youth being attacked by dogs and fire hoses, right? Like this is beamed not just across the United States, but across the world. So harnessing, using the tools at your disposal. And I think many social movements today are using social media and other tools very effectively. And opposition is doing so as well, of course. But one piece of this deliberate protest is making sure you're making full advantage of the technology available. Number two, right? Having an effective message, right? That is inclusive, that is positive, that is, attracts people to your cause, that doesn't create divisions. Think about, in recent years, the marriage equality movement. And I just said it right there, right? Marriage equality, right? That was a term that was developed over years by advocates who are seeking fair access and equal access to the institution of marriage for the LGBT community. It wasn't a term that was used at the outset of that campaign, but rather, after, looking at what messages were resonating and what were not in that movement. And, if people remember, in 2004, conservative elements, organized around stopping marriage equality at the ballot box with state referenda, trying to use it to juice turnout for people who they thought would vote against. To vote for those referenda that would stop states from passing marriage equality laws. Go, to 2008 in California. There was a California ballot initiative the same year that President Obama was elected overwhelmingly in California. There was a ballot initiative that failed. And the advocates looked at the tactics they were using, looked at the messages they were using, and they said messages that weren't working were those that seemed to suggest that the advocates were asking for some kind of special treatment for the LGBT community, right? And those were the messages that weren't resonating with people. But with the term marriage equality, that seemed to be, that's about fairness. That's about people sharing things equally, right? You fast forward 4 years from that, and you see ballot referenda put on multiple states to support marriage equality, and many of them passed, including in Maine. And in Maine, right, let's go to the final piece of this. I've talked about, medium, message, and now let's talk about the third piece, network, right? Who is your network, right? What networks are you leveraging to advance your change as part of deliberate practice, right? And my answer to you should be, if you're interested in advocating for social change, is all of them, right? So the late labor organizer Jane McAlevey called this concept sort of whole worker organizing. You tap into other resources that people have, other connections, social capital that they have, and the Maine ballot referendum. An aspect of that advocacy, that successful ballot referendum that passed in Maine in 2012, an element of that was that the advocates went door to door and had engaged and deep conversations with people, hundreds of thousands of people across the state, to talk to them about, what marriage equality could mean for the community. And that ballot measure passed overwhelmingly in 2012, right? So that network, talking to people, face-to-face communications, building on your relationships. Another campaign that I studied in my research is the campaign of the union Unite, HERE, Unite Here, in Southern California and in Long Beach, where they're advocating for a ballot initiative that would raise the minimum wage for hotel workers, right? And the idea was that if they raise the minimum wage for hotel workers in the city, it would mean the residents who were the union members who are residents in the community would spend more money locally. So oftentimes you see small business owners are aligned against such an initiative to raise the minimum wage, but the small business owners were convinced that, hey, this meant that your customers would have more money in your pocket. The advocates also went to other groups. They went to environmental groups. They went to homeowners associations. So wealthier people, not a lot of union members, but the message to them, the inclusive message of fairness, was, hey, we all want a vibrant business community. We want our people who live here to have good wages, and they're going to spend in the community. That's going to support the community. And so they got these different groups who might normally not align to develop into a rich and dense network. And that kind of inclusive message, broad-based network is how you develop over time, at least from the research I've done, this kind of deliberate protest. So if we look at the work of Chenoweth and Stephan and say, okay, how do we get to a number like 3.5? How would a community get to a number like 3.5% of the population? Is it some magic number? No. Is it an easy solution? No. But it's something for folks to strive for. But you have to do it in a painstaking fashion, right? door to door, person to person, conversation to conversation. And just like, in Long Beach, where the Unite here, went to homeowners associations, talk in your book groups, your church groups, wherever you are, and talk to people about the social change you might want to look for, and you might want to advocate for. And a critical element of the of deliberate practice is what are known as stretch goals, right? Things that you can reach for that might be, a bit out of your reach, but not so far out of your reach that you can't obtain them, right? So those stretch goals, you build your allies through your network and using the message and using the right mediums, you reach that goal, right? And then you build trust, you build social capital among the network, and then that network can be leveraged and utilized to get to the next stretch goal and the one after that, until ultimately, right, you can do your best to try to achieve that number, which again is not a magic number. It's a number that you can work towards through what I call deliberate protest. So I hope you've liked these sorts of ideas. I'll put some more, some follow-up that you can look into in the show pages if you are interested in some of these thoughts. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next time.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.